haunted house at Myrtle Farm. America's most famous haunted house. Old houses hold within their walls countless memories of people who lived within them for many years before departing to their graves, leaving behind utter silence, where their conversations and laughter once filled the air. Yet sometimes, in rare cases, those ancient walls harbor more than just memories. They hold phenomena that occasionally manifest as muffled sounds and silent footsteps with no discernible source, or as pale, terrifying faces peering from another realm, instilling indescribable terror and panic in the living. Some call these entities ghosts, linking them to the spirits of the dead who, for unknown reasons, remain bound to the very places where they died. The house we write about today is one of these eerie locations, a place so densely crowded with ghosts that it has rightfully earned the title of America's most famous haunted house. Ghosts? Are you joking? Frances laughed at the story told by the old man who managed the house, then added in a tone tinged with defiance, "There's no such thing as ghosts, sir. These are just superstitions. To prove it to you, I'll stay here tonight. Book me a room, please. We'll see who scares whom, me or your old tattered ghosts." The old man didn't argue. He registered her name in his ledger, handed her the room keys, and wished her a pleasant night. He was a dignified, respectable man who spoke with grace and courtesy. But Frances was unsettled by the sinister smile that lingered on his lips and the mocking glint in his eyes. "What lunatic believes in ghostly nonsense?" Frances muttered to herself as she fought drowsiness on the plush bed in the small room she'd rented. Moments later, she surrendered to her heavy, exhausted eyelids and fell into a deep sleep. When Frances opened her eyes again, she had no sense of the time. Had dawn broken? A faint yellow light flickered on the wall. A strange gloom gripped her emotions. The air in the room had grown unnervingly thick, and she felt as though something was pressing down on her chest. She slowly turned her body toward the other side of the bed, but froze suddenly, overwhelmed by paralyzing terror. A woman in black stood at the foot of the bed, staring at her. She held a candle in her hand, wore a green bonnet, and was dressed in strange, antiquated clothing. Frances screamed and buried her head under the blanket. Moments passed in eerie silence. "Maybe it's a trick, a crude prank by that old man," Frances told herself as she gradually peeked out from under the covers. The woman in black still stood statue-like in place. She looked so real that the candle flame danced, emitting a thin wisp of smoke. Summoning courage, Frances slowly reached her trembling hand toward the woman, but her fingers barely grazed the figure before it vanished like smoke. By the next morning, Mrs. Frances Myers not only believed in ghosts, she would later author a book about her personal encounter with the ghosts of Myrtle House 1. This experience would drive her to dig into the history of the house and purchased it, becoming one of the many names that owned it over 2 centuries. The Ghost of Chloe, the Enslaved Maid. Alleged photo of the ghost Chloe, taken by one of the house's owners. In the early 19th century, slavery was a central part of American life, particularly in the South, with its vast cotton plantations. Myrtle Plantation, like others, owned hundreds of enslaved people. They lived wretched lives, toiling all day in the fields and sleeping at night in dilapidated, miserable huts, unfit even as shelters for animals. The only slight relief in their suffering came from the kindness of the plantation's owner, Mrs. Elizabeth Potter, who inherited the estate from her husband and managed it skillfully for many years. As the years passed, Mrs. Potter grew elderly and could no longer oversee the enslaved laborers or manage the fields. None of her 4 children, who lived in the city, wanted to take over the plantation, so the old woman reluctantly entrusted the task to Clark Woodruff, the husband of her daughter Sarah, who lived with her in the house alongside her 2 granddaughters, Carolina and Mary. Woodruff was an opportunistic man, notorious for his vile temper. He treated the enslaved people with cruelty. Chloe lived in constant terror after Woodruff abandoned her and stopped caring for her. She feared being sent back to work in the fields, a fate akin to being cast out of paradise into hell. To avoid this, she began eavesdropping on Woodruff's conversations with his wife and mother-in-law, hoping to hear if they mentioned her name or plans to return her to the fields. But poor Chloe's luck ran out when Woodruff caught her red-handed, listening in on the family. To make an example of her, he dragged her in front of the other enslaved women, pulled out a knife, and cut off her ear. From that day on, the pitiful Chloe wore a green bonnet to hide the disfigured scar of her severed ear. What happened next? Here, accounts diverge, but the outcome remains the same. One version claims that Chloe, desperate to regain the family's trust, added a measure of poison to a cake she was ordered to bake by Mrs. Woodruff for her daughter Carolina's birthday celebration. Chloe believed the naive Chloe. Whether driven by naivety or vengeance, Chloe's fate was sealed. Some say she poisoned the cake, believing the toxin would merely sicken the family, allowing her to nurse them back to health and regain their trust. Others claim she acted out of revenge. Regardless of her motive, the outcome was tragic. Woodruff himself did not eat the cake, but his pregnant wife and 2 daughters did. Soon after, they showed symptoms of poisoning and died that very day. Woodruff's grief and rage were indescribable. Fearing his wrath, some of the enslaved people dragged Chloe from the hut where she hid to Myrtles Plantation. There, they placed a noose around her neck and hanged her from a tree opposite the house. After cutting her body down, they dismembered her, crushed the remains with stones, and threw them into the nearby Mississippi River. A night of blood and ghosts. That night became the most horrifying in the plantation's history. A macabre blend of blood, death, and Woodruff's frenzied screams. At dawn, Woodruff cast one final glance at the dining room where his wife and daughters had died, locked its door, and forbade anyone from entering it for the rest of his life. Today, visitors call this room the playroom. Claiming to hear the laughter and playful voices of children echoing within on certain nights. Yet, when investigated, the room always lies empty. On moonlit nights, passers-by occasionally report seeing the ghost of a little girl jumping and laughing by the playroom's window. Many believe these apparitions and sounds belong to Woodruff's innocent daughters, whose lives were cut short that fateful day. The legend of the Green Bonnet. The most infamous ghost, however, is the maid, Lady in the Green Bonnet. Widely believed to be Chloe's spirit, she is said to wander the house at night carrying a candle, accompanied by the faint sobs of children. An alleged photo of her ghost, taken by a former owner, is now sold as a souvenir to visitors eager for spectral tales. Those who've spent the night swear they awoke to find a black woman holding a candle, staring eerily at them from the foot of their bed. Perhaps the most infamous feature of Myrtles Plantation is the sheer number of its ghosts, a distinction that has rightfully earned it the title of America's Most Haunted House. Some claim the property is cursed, built atop an ancient Native American burial ground, and among its many spirits is said to be the ghost of a Native American woman. Others argue that the multitude of hauntings stems from the home's blood-soaked history. Rumors allege 11 murders. occurred within its walls. A legacy of violence. Among these tragedies is the murder of country tweeter Louis Sterling, son of a 19th-century plantation owner who was stabbed to death inside the house. There are also accounts of three Union soldiers who hid there during the American Civil War, only to be discovered and killed. A chilling detail persists. A large, human-shaped bloodstain stained the floor of the room where one soldier died. Despite countless attempts to scrub it away, the stain remained until it mysteriously vanished years later. In the 1920s, police found the body of a member of the Williams family, then owners of the plantation, murdered, likely by thieves attempting to loot the estate. The haunting of William Winter. The most notorious victim, however, was William Winter, a lawyer and son-in-law to Mary Cobb, the plantation's owner. He lived there with his wife and children. One night in 1871, an unknown caller lured Winter outside under the guise of a conversation. As he stepped out, a fatal gunshot struck him. Mortally wounded, Winter crawled back into the house, dragging himself toward the staircase in a desperate attempt to reach his sleeping wife and children upstairs. But his strength failed, and he breathed his last on the yeet. 17th step. To this day, visitors claim to hear phantom footsteps ascending the stairs at night. Footsteps that climb relentlessly but always fade at the proper 17th step, mirroring Winter's final moments. His ghost is said to repeat this futile journey eternally, trapped in the agony of his unfinished path. Thus, Myrtle Plantation stands not just as a relic of Southern grandeur, but as a tapestry of violence, loss, and spectral echoes, a place where history's darkest whispers linger in every shadow.